going on? What's going on?
What's up? This is a little different. Usually I'm on that side of the camera.
I know, it's kind of uncomfortable actually seeing you on this side of the camera, but this will be a good time.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of questions, both by residents and other creators, wondering like how I film the 73 question interviews, and like I've had plenty of FaceTime calls and everything about like the setup, from the equipment to the thought process. So I figured as a start of this second channel, NDMD Productions, we're gonna talk about more the products that I use to help tell stories. So let's get started. Usually that's my line.
Well, yeah. Well, tell us what kind of brought you to like even start filming these like 73 question series?
So this all started, during COVID, when all the med students, including my class, were not able to shadow in the hospital. And because of that, knowing that we needed to make a specialty decision, of course, a very important decision in our medical careers, I wanted to figure out a way to safely expose people to not just the field, but also the personalities. Because at the end of the day, a lot of personality matches is what determines like how you best enjoy a specific medical specialty. So I was inspired by the Vogue 73 question format because I never enjoy like the stiff collar professional interrogation kind of interviews. I didn't find them entertaining to watch, and they didn't reach the audience of young pre-meds and medical students that they're meant for. So of course I had to figure out a way to jerry-rig how to do that kind of fluid one-take interview, because Vogue obviously has a larger budget than NDMD Productions, and they have an entire crew adjusting lighting and everything. But because I had some experience in professional photography, videography before med school, I said, you know what, let's have some fun with this. Let's jerry-rig something. So the setup has evolved over the years as I've gotten better, technology has advanced, etc. But I can show you guys kind of what I use, and hopefully you guys can make some similar interviews as you go.
Yeah, well, clearly you're a one-man wrecking crew, and I'm looking at this gear and it reminds me of some Mission Impossible type energy. Why don't you walk us through like what are we looking at?
So
this is all gizmo stuff to us.
Yeah, so the main setup here is the Zhiyun Weeble S gimbal. Had this literally from the very first interview. And I actually started with the Canon M50, a fantastic starter camera, but have since upgraded to the Canon R6. When I used the Canon M50, I used the, I believe, EF 22mm, which is since it's a crop sensor lens. By the way, there's gonna be a lot of tech talk here, so everything will be linked in the description. But for those interested in the gear, I'll nerd out a little bit. So for a crop sensor, a 22mm is actually a 35mm equivalent, which is a very standard film focal length. So now that the R6, I got a full frame camera, this is a prime 35mm RF glass. It goes all the way down to f1.8, which is super useful because when I interview people, I never know what the lighting situation is going to be like. So having the ability to open up the aperture super wide will help me to get super crisp, outlines and bokeh in no matter what situation I got. So all that attached to the gimbal, which is how I'm able to walk around and get smooth shots like this, right? And gimbals are super easy. This is not a very expensive one, and in fact, it's actually kind of old. So, a big part of this is the gear that I'm using is something that I've learned to use, but it's something that has evolved over time and can definitely be done using cheaper equipment. I want to make that like very, very clear. But for the audio setup, actually, if you can come here, I now use the DJI mic set. It has this receiver here, and it's able to, I'll show you in a second with the different receivers, or I guess like separate mics, I guess you call it. So I can monitor audio levels here, and that's how I'm able to get my voice asking the questions, and then their voice answering the questions, both on separate tracks and clear. This allows you to record in stereo, and then in your editing software, you convert it to dual mono. So that way you're not like hearing each of the voices on each side. Again, if you want to know more about that, just look up how to use the DJI mics to have 2 separate streams. But that syncs all in camera, so it saves me a lot of time on the editing side of things. And also with this gimbal, you can see I shoot in 4K, 24 frames per second, C-Log3. And then with this little scroll wheel here, I'm able to adjust aperture on the fly. So you can notice right there, it's f5. I can do it to f1.8, all the way down to f22 at the scroll of a button. And so that allows me to be able to walk around in different lighting environments and still kind of make sure things are properly exposed without having to touch any of the settings. Super simple. So kind of touching on more of what I use, that's kind of the main setup here. But if you come a little bit closer, you can see this is more of the DJI set. This is the battery pack we use. The receiver from here goes right in here, and it has 2 little external mics. So what I will do is I will have one on me to collect that audio, and then I'll use a Rode Lav connected to the second receiver, and what I'll do is I'll have the guest, whoever's answering the questions, have this on them. And what's great about these, it also allows you to record backup audio if you want. See right there on a safety channel, something that I probably should have used a lot more of, just because I've had some audio mishaps, but you live and you learn. But yeah, this literally saves my life. It's magnetic, it clips, so you can clip it anywhere, like this. And just I can't recommend this enough, because what I used to do is this setup over here. So what I used to have was a Rode like shotgun mic, and this could be any shotgun mic. I would have this attached like this to the gimbal setup, so that way when I'm holding it, I would get my audio here, and I would use, instead of like that external receiver, I'd have this H1 and Zoom handy recorder, like an external recorder. Same thing, hook the lav up to this, and I would have it in their pocket and run it up, and I would do the classic clap sync. Fun fact, the movie boards that you see like this, what it does is it makes a giant peak in the audio, and so it makes it super easy to line up multiple audio tracks in post. You just line up that peak, and then everything after that is going to be synced up. So it took an extra step on the editing side, which is why I love this DJI mic setup. I don't have to do that. It all is synced in camera. But of course, if that's out of budget, or if you want to like try a simpler setup, my first 25, I think 73 question interviews were filmed using that jerry-rigged setup, so it works. In addition, I have a lot of, check this out though.
Sushi.
Messy with the sushi. But as Peter McKinnon Nomadic lens filter kit. So depending on the lighting situation, I'll have like a Pro Mist filter, which basically kind of softens edges of like the digital, there's a technical term for it. I'm completely blanking out. I swear I know what I'm talking about. But it basically softens the edges of like the digital crispiness that you get with mirrorless cameras. It gives it kind of a cinematic, floaty look. And then if it's super bright, I'll have a variable ND filter here. So you typically hear this as the sunglasses for the lens. So with video settings, you have to keep a certain shutter speed. So I film in I film in 24 frames per second. So you always set your shutter speed to 2 times the amount of your frames. So it'd be 1/50th of a second. And also there's something called a native ISO, which you want to keep that, like that's what ISO your camera performs best at. And for this camera, it's 800, which is pretty bright. So sometimes it might be overexposed if you're shooting outside. So having one of these with me helps me to adapt to basically any lighting situation that I film in, because you know some of my guests prefer to film not in their homes, outdoor, in parks and stuff, and I completely accommodate that. And finally, for the thumbnail parts, I do take all my thumbnails. I don't just like screenshot them. I used to take all of them on the R6. I have a 24-70 lens on that, but that would entail me exporting the raw file, editing and everything, which is like another couple hours on my workflow. And of course, I'm doing all of this in med school, so anything that saves me time is just amazing. So this is now how I take all my thumbnails. This is, for those of you guys who are like camera enthusiasts, this is the Fuji X100V. Yes, it is like the hype sneaker of the camera world, but there's good reason for that. I have preloaded in here a Kodak 400, or no, Portra 400 film emulator, and there's so many different film recipes that you can put on here. But the crazy thing is it looks so good straight out of camera in JPEGs. So literally it's point, click, and then I have an incredible headshot thumbnail to use. And in fact, I've used this camera for like brand stuff and everything. It saved me so much time. I paid resale for it. I'm not proud of it. But personally for me, I'll probably make a whole separate video on this camera just because like I'm super passionate. It's not for everybody, but for specifically the people with not a lot of time on their hands and the just pure enthusiasts, this is by far one of the best cameras ever.
Well, good stuff, man. We really appreciate the crash course. I mean, it's overwhelming for a lot of people, but it definitely increased our knowledge for sure. Awesome stuff. So now you got the equipment and you had the idea and the inspiration. What does it look like when you've decided, hey, I'm doing a 73 questions video with X precision?
Oh man, so a lot of these are definitely months in planning, and I script them all out using Notion. Notion, please sponsor me. But it's all in here. So also, not a lot of people get to see what I look like behind the camera when I'm doing this, because it's pretty ridiculous.
It's quite a shame for them, you know? We're really in for a treat.
So, like, basically to give you a little preview, okay, well, we'll do a little shot of Aki, the cat. What's up, homie? So when I'm filming, I'll have the interviewer in front of me. So everything behind me is I'm looking at framing, lighting, audio levels, all here, making micro adjustments, following the person, all while trying at least to be like cordial and making eye contact with them. And then I have my questions on my phone that I would have like here and just scrolling through to make sure I stay in the right spot. So like, you know, I'd be like, hey, Aki, what was your favorite meal today? How long did you nap? Very good, very good. And so like I'd be having to do that. So I look super ridiculous. There's a lot of wheels turning in my head as I'm filming these, and in case you haven't noticed, I've avoided telling my guests to walk upstairs in our shots, because I have quite literally almost fallen down multiple stairs, and it's also really hard to like keep framing and everything going upstairs. But that actually leads me into how I plan routes. So one, I would have the camera with me. Of course, we normally start at the door, and for those of you guys who are commenting like, why are they like getting up and moving around all over the place? Why don't they just sit down? Like, it's because I tell them to do this. That's part of my own creative vision. I want it to be like somebody inviting you into a home, right? So with that being said, I would start at the front door, of course, tell them to knock, welcome me in, and similar to what I told you guys at the beginning of this video, I tell them like just turn on literally every single light in the house, just because the more light I have gives me more ability for like, let's say, lighting options and different frames. So it's easiest to do point A, which is the door, to point B, which is like the final ending shot, and it's pretty convenient with how I do these. I do like the deep reflective questions at the end, so I want them to be sitting down. So I'd pick like, hey, you know, this couch frame looks pretty sweet, right? Do a test shot, you know, make sure the lighting's all good, and I tell them, okay, this is where we want to end up at the end. Now, this is where we get creative and say, okay, we start at the door, then let's answer a couple questions there, and then we'll plan out a route. So, you know, a lot of times they'll say, hey, you know, let's make you coffee, let's offer you a cup of water and stuff, which obviously I can't drink while I'm like doing all this, but it adds some element of your personality to these interviews. So and usually it's like, hey, start at the door, we'll walk and talk, go to the kitchen, and like, you know, I tell them, you take the lead, and you know, I will make sure it's framed up well and it looks good. And of course, before we start recording the final product, I will kind of walk around the route and make sure that everywhere is not like stupidly blown out in highlights as far as lighting goes. And then from there, that's how these interviews go. I would sometimes tell them like question cues. So, you know, say to avoid standing in one place for like a ridiculous amount of time, I'll tell them, hey, when you hear the question, how many hours do you typically work in a day? That's their cue to be like, all right, move to the next area. So like all this setup is so that way they can take the lead and I just make them look good. At least that's my job. And you know, from there, it's a little bit of Hollywood. You can say like, hey, I'm passionate about my plants. And so I tell them, hey, for part of this interview, go water your plants. You know, like it gives you a talking point. Or I always have questions of like, do you have any pets? Hey, maybe like make sure you walk over by your cat or your dog, you know, while we're at that point of the interview, so that way you can show and not just tell that you have a pet. It's all things that I tell them to do because you want to know these physicians as people, not just as like the doctors that are behind your clinic wall. So that's really important to me, and I hope like that is portrayed in the videos that I make. But that's kind of the thought process of doing these. Of course, I have like a pretty standard set of questions that I specifically tailor to every single specialty. But then the rest of it, I tell them, you know, just have fun, speak into the camera as if you're talking to a high schooler that wants to be in your shoes one day. And I've never had a problem with any guests speaking from the heart and telling incredible stories.
Cool stuff, man. Well, you've kind of alluded to it in terms of why you do these videos and the purpose behind them, but we know that you've got a couple more specialties on your quote-unquote hit list that you got to get to. But once you've kind of covered the majority of medical specialties, what's the future of the 73 Questions series? Where's it headed?
That is to be determined. Of course, residency will have its ebbs and flows and will change things. I'd love to do subspecialties within whatever I decide to go into, which will also be announced maybe by the time this video is up. But yeah, I think like in general, the heart of at least the NDMD channel is the story of people and, you know, how medicine in itself is an art form and there is magic in that. And of course, this channel, I want it to be more about how you can capture that magic. So, you know, it's a long-winded answer. It's maybe a theory answer to that question, but I don't think I'll ever stop doing interviews. It's such a great excuse to meet people and just broaden everyone's horizons.
Hey man, you're busy traveling the U.S. and the world, so we appreciate you taking some time to chill with the med school boys, and we'll let you be. You know, I know you got places to be.
No, thank you guys. Thank you for having me in Texas, and I know I'll be seeing you soon then.